Hi, I'm Tracy,
And I'm Kathy.
and this is Curious Explorers.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
So, hi, Kathy.
Hey Tracy, how you doing?
I'm okay. How are the dogs?
Well, as you can hear, maybe they're aware that we're doing this because they're hollering at us.
They're like, please don't talk about this.
No, they're like, please let me down and give me a cookie.
I liked my explanation, but okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, today's topic is a continuation, really, of our last topic, and it wasn't my intention originally, but I'm cracking up because now people are going to think we're the demon channel.
Right. And maybe we are. Who knows? This could all be it's a ruse. We're demons.
But today's topic, if I had to give it a title, would be like Demons and Deliverance. Because in our last episode, not only did we talk about a real case from Father Malachi Martin's book, Hostage to the Devil, and you spoke about deliverances versus Catholic exorcisms and so forth. So this caught my eye. I was watching a movie with Jay over the weekend. You know, I always look for like the scary movies.
Yeah.
Shocker. And The Deliverance was one of the options. I hadn't even heard of it, but now it's getting all this press.
Yeah, it's a new big one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So What I wanted to do for the 5 people who haven't heard about the case or seen the movie yet, might be more than 5, is talk about the actual real life case of Latoya Ammons and her family, because that's the case that inspired the movie, The Deliverance. So
okay.
What I'll do is I'll just summarize, but jump in as you will. I have copious notes. So let's see what we got here. So The Deliverance. I'm not even sure that what was done was a deliverance. It was in the movie. And I'll tell you a little bit about what's different in the movie than the real life story. But in the real life story, behind the Netflix movie, The Deliverance, it's the story of Latoya Ammons and her family, her 3 children. She, her 3 children, her mother moved into this house it was a rental on a quiet street of small 1-story homes in Gary, Indiana, right? So the story was first chronicled in the Indiana Star newspaper, but it was based on over 800 pages of official documents that reporters had gleaned from hospitals, or the hospital where she and her family were evaluated, the police, and the church. So Ms. Ammons signed releases, actually allowing the Star to review this otherwise very privileged medical, psychological, and other official records that are not typically open to the public. And she did this knowing that what would be in there would not be flattering. And that's actually one of the things that I think is to her credit. But we'll talk about the kind of differing viewpoints about what happened. But anyway, so, you know, one of the people quoted in all of these news stories about this is Police Captain Charles Austin from the Gary Police Department. And he said it was the strangest story he had ever heard. I think that's probably an understatement. But he's a 36-year veteran of the Gary Police Department.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's not somebody, it's not his first rodeo.
Right.
In terms
He's not
of
a rookie. Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he initially thought that Latoya Ammons and her family had concocted an elaborate tale as a way to make money. And they were financially strapped. They were not in a position to not need money. They were not in a position to leave the house. And we'll talk about why they really needed to later. But after several visits to their home and interviews with witnesses, you know, Captain Charles Austin simply said, "I am a believer." He said, you know, that's it. So it all started in November 2011. That's when it's shortly after Latoya and her family moved in. And it started with seeing flies, like way more flies, even into December, than you would ever expect to see in the winter. You just don't see flies in the cold usually. And there were, I guess, hundreds or more of them. And she said, we killed them and killed them and killed them, but they kept coming back. Now that's almost foreshadowing of the other kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say it is a common occurrence, and it is something that has that's reported in lots of demonic cases, and is kind of a famous scene in a famous film as well. Yeah,
100%. Amityville Horror. I'm sure there are others. All right. So again, here there's a zillion flies at a time of year when you would not expect to find them. She and the family report killing them, but they just keep coming back. Spooky footsteps are heard. I think at least by LaToya. It's not clear if the rest of the family did, but there were creaking doors. The basement door, which is locked, starts opening on its own. And these are things that actually were in the movie. Mm-hmm. She also sees a shadow figure. And I think if I remember correctly, she's not even sure she's dreaming at first because she's not sure what this is. But so, I could probably explain away even the flies and many of those things. However, now we get to her reporting that she finds the children levitating above their beds and speaking in guttural voices and objects flying on their own. Now, Kathy,
less easy to explain. That's less easy to explain.
And now, if you didn't know the rest of the story, what would you say that could be, paranormally speaking? And other than demons, what else does that make you think of?
Levitation? I don't know
if not levitation, but
right.
I'm just thinking things flying in the house. I'm thinking poltergeist.
Oh, poltergeist. Sure. Poltergeist.
Yeah, levitation.
Right. And I don't know how old are the kids? Well, honestly, the Enfield poltergeist had levitation in it as well.
Oh,
it was just very, very short, in fact, that was one of the claims that the neighbors claimed to see the child levitating while she was sleeping.
Okay. Interesting. So I don't know what to make of that. I mean, it's not the first time I've heard of somebody reporting that. It's one of those things that's harder to believe if you haven't seen it, but
right.
There's more.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, by now, between the guttural voices and the flies and the objects flying, and I think people were wounded by objects flying, and there were other things as well. Speaking in strange voices, nobody wants to hear their kids doing that. So they approach various churches in the area, and, pretty much all of them are either unwilling to even listen or say they can't help them.
Okay.
And now that's not an uncommon theme either, as we talked about last time. But according to the Indiana Star, the paper that broke the story, there were 2 clairvoyants they consulted, and the clairvoyants said that they should cleanse the entire house. Never a bad idea when you have a lot of flies, I guess, but with bleach and ammonia, and then make oil crosses on all of the doors and windows. And so they did this. And then the clairvoyants also said that there were 200 demons in the house. Sounds like a lot
of demons.
Yeah.
That's a herd of demons. There's a whole lot of demons in there.
The house probably felt very small at that point.
Very crowded, very crowded.
Violating some sort of ordinance.
Yeah, I'm certain they didn't have a permit. Didn't have a permit for that, I'm sure. I'm sure.
So it's not funny. Sorry. So the clairvoyants tell her to set up Christian religious items like statues of the Virgin Mary and Jesus and Joseph in the basement and create some sort of altar, and to also burn sage and so forth, and to wear white clothing. And they said, I'm sure there were other things as well, but they said to leave the Bible open to Psalm 91. So I actually looked that up. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but I'm going to read about half.
Give the gist.
Yeah, I'm going to get, because I wasn't, I understand after reading it why that was the recommendation.
Right.
So it said, whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. If you say, the Lord is my refuge, and you make the Most High your dwelling, no harm will overtake you. Now there's more, but that I thought gave you the gist, and then
Yes. I get the point of that. Yes.
So unfortunately, things were okay for a few days as that seems to be the standard. And then they became much worse.
Right. It's kind of like taking an antibiotic and stopping it before you finish the whole dose. Right. So the infection comes back, and
But worse.
Yes, exactly.
And
I have a quick question.
Resistant. Yes.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Were they Catholic?
I don't know.
Right.
Actually.
Okay.
I'm sure that has been documented, but I don't know.
I mean, I'm not sure that it matters in cases of certainly I don't think it matters in cases of exorcism, but I mean, being faithful, I think matters, but I think you can be, Pentecostal and well, I shouldn't have picked that one because you would have gotten a different type of exorcism, but you can be Lutheran and get a Roman exorcism. But this was recommended by clairvoyants, correct? This was not recommendations of the church.
Right. So the altar with the religious statues and the cleaning of the house and the making oil crosses and the psalm, all recommended apparently by two different clairvoyants.
I also would say, if anyone's listening or watching, do not clean your house with bleach and ammonia, because I believe that makes mustard gas. So please,
it's deadly. Actually,
it is absolutely deadly. Do not do that. You can choose one or the other, and you can do them one after the other, but do not do them in tandem.
That's actually more final than the demons.
Yeah, you're way
and
better.
More rapid.
You are way better off facing a demon than mustard gas in the short term.
Since they're alive, I'm assuming that somebody told them not to do it at the same time.
Yes, exactly. Please don't.
Just don't do it. It's going to make it worse. So the kids, within a few days, as often happens in these situations, reportedly become possessed. And this was determined by, their evidencing bulging eyes and speaking in strange voices. Mom was not possessed, but the youngest little boy, then 7 at the time, sat in a closet talking to a boy that no one else could see, which again, wouldn't automatically concern me, but the other boy started describing what it felt like to be killed. That would concern me more. Understatement.
And this has been going on for a long time at this point. Right.
Yeah.
They've been dealing with this. So
I think it's actually still early in their journey. Okay. Though.
Right. But if they've already started doing like altars and stuff like that, they're well along the way of believing that this is what they're experiencing.
100%. They were not thinking it's something else.
They weren't. Yeah. They weren't thinking maybe we, have rats in the house. They were, they were convinced the direction that this was going.
Yes. Yes. So the daughter said it felt like very often she was being held down and choked and couldn't get her breath. That's really scary. And also, and like all joking aside, and I know we joke about stuff that's like we can't verify, but you know what? That's not an unheard of thing people report when there's something supernatural going on in the house.
And that kind of phenomena is reported in lots of different paranormal experiences, not just in demonic or negative. However, regardless of that, what they're experiencing, they're genuinely afraid of. And so whatever is causing that fear, the fear is legitimate. And, the idea of a kid being scared and experiencing those things, regardless of where it's coming from, that's awful. That's a terrible thing for someone to go through. Yeah.
No, it's horrendous. And honestly, I think we may be kind of acting out some of the skepticism of a lot of the people in their lives. So religious leaders, the psychologists who evaluated them, other people, members of the public, reporters and so forth. There were a lot of people who were like, come on, people, like this can't be real. And
but you can be skeptical.
Why.
Right. And, full disclosure, I am skeptical of, the interpretation of those things. What I'm not, however, is skeptical of kids being afraid and kids having experiences. And to me, it's kind of irrelevant. You know what I mean? Right. Like at the end of the day, these children, regardless of where this was coming from, were experiencing something that I have no doubt was terrifying for them.
No matter what, it's not
Right.
okay. And
Exactly. No matter
yeah.
what, it doesn't matter. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if it is what they're
concern.
saying, if it is what
That's
they're saying,
worse.
that is so scary that I can't even fathom it.
Right. No, 100%. So at this point, understandably, the clairvoyants tell LaToya that she and the children should move out of the house, but they can't afford to do so.
Right.
And I want to comment more on that in a little bit, because I think that's actually really important. Just if we take this as true that it is demonic, I think that actually does play into it. And I'll tell you why later. But on April 19th, 2012, the family visits their family physician, Dr. Jeffrey, I hope I pronounce this correctly, Onyukwu. If I get this wrong, please somebody correct me. But he said it was the most bizarre thing he had ever heard of. And he was very skeptical, but he said he was also scared to go in the home. And I get that too.
Yeah, I get it.
But in his medical notes, because remember, LaToya has given permission for the newspaper to access, again, all this stuff that would never be publicly accessible.
Right.
And in his notes, Dr. Onyukwu, wrote the words delusions of a ghost in the home, and they were suffering from hallucinations. And, there's something about, the family being delusional. But then during the visit, I forget who it is who says this, because there's a number of different people involved, but somebody else witnesses that the Ammon's sons, both of them, cursed Dr. Onyukwu in demonic voices. And at some point, medical staff evaluating them say the youngest boy was, quote, lifted and thrown into the wall with nobody touching him. This is a Department of Children's Services report, because DCS was called. There was a social worker, a case worker. So at this point, it's not just the family reaching out. It's now, other people being brought in because of the concern.
Right.
So,
and it's important to note too, and what you described there in the reporting, there are very charged terms being used, right? As opposed to strict reporting. So, the doctor is immediately saying, hallucinations, immediately saying delusional, ascribing to the experiences that they're having, the fact that there's a lack of reality to them. And then to have subsequently other trained professionals then say, hold the phone, this also happened. That's compelling.
Right. The fact that the youngest boy is lifted and thrown into the wall, and this is witnessed. And I'm not sure exactly who witnesses. It says like medical staff, and no one was touching him. So 911's called. The kids are taken to the hospital. The Indiana Department of Children's Services comes to investigate LaToya, and she's assigned a DCS family case manager whose name is Valerie Washington. And actually, a lot of what was in the movie by award-winning director Lee Simmons does mirror that. Some details are definitely changed, but some are the same. So the kids are evaluated at the hospital, all three kids. The hospital staff find that the kids and the mom are all healthy, and they find that there are no psychiatric issues. And I wrote in parentheses in my notes, WTF, because I'm thinking, even if the kids are just creating this because there's some other emotional issue present,
right?
You don't have to be psychotic,
right,
to have a psychiatric issue. So to me, that just seems weird.
And it seems like checking off a box, right? And there didn't appear to be any, you know what I mean? It seems kind of like a quick kind of, a quick way of maybe endorsing the idea that what they were dealing with was supernatural in nature. Yeah.
Right. What they're saying, no, I think that the hospital staff basically feel
was saying
all
hoax.
Fine. In other words, there's either that or there's an unhealthy family system.
Right.
And
but there's no overt. Right.
They're producing this because, now it's this kind of shared delusion of the family.
Right.
So the caseworker Ms. Washington, Valerie Washington, goes in to speak with LaToya. And when she does this, the youngest son's eyes roll back in his head reportedly, and he speaks in guttural tones and tries to strangle his older brother. Now, again, could somebody have a behavioral problem and do that, or have some sort of psychotic illness or something else? Absolutely. But later, the 9-year-old boy says it's time to die. And the Valerie Washington's original DCS report recounts that the 9-year-old boy had a weird grin, in quotes, and that he walked backward up a wall to the ceiling. That gives me the creeps. My hair.
So everything that you're saying, the guttural sounds, the kind of
eyes rolling
tone,
back,
all of that, I could imagine is within the realm of even a 7-year-old realizing this, this is what's expected of me. And this is part of this like spooky thing that we're doing. Right. Having a weird smile, listen, kids watch YouTube, you see this stuff. There's the smile demon that's on YouTube. There's all of those different things, but
that's so creepy,
but
so
walking up backwards up a wall to the ceiling, that defies the laws of physics. So that to me is something that's different. Like the behavioral things, there's nothing that you've said yet that to me would be demonstrably demonic, right? So, but things like levitation, like being shot across a room with nobody touching you, walking backwards up a wall to the ceiling, which by the way, the fact that it was backwards is just icing on the cake because it's impossible to walk up a wall to the ceiling, forwards. That to me, those are things that are indications that you're not dealing with something that's necessarily psychological, that there's even an explanation for psychologically, because you're dealing with the laws of physics at this point. You're dealing with what the body is capable of doing and what it's not capable of doing.
Yeah. And just so you know, it's like I've seen like clips of people like running up a wall, like doing a stunt, like where you run up the wall and flip.
Right.
But apparently the
I've never seen someone do it backwards.
Well, no, and beyond that, and the social worker is saying he didn't like run at the wall and flip. He just walked up to the ceiling. And this is a young boy. This is a 9-year-old child.
Right.
So I'm not now. I'm in the something is not just
now. You have to question now. If you're going to question this, you have to question the veracity or the ethics of the witness. And there's nothing to indicate at this point that you should. Right. No, there's no way they were like, I want to fill out this report and say he walked backwards up. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way that there's no way that someone at DCF is like, you know what would be great to do? Let's say he walked backwards to the ceiling. It's not going to be something that they want to have to defend.
I don't think so. And it says also that he flipped over, Valerie Campbell, sorry, not Valerie Campbell, a different person. I'm getting my people mixed up, but he flipped over. Oh, sorry. Campbell is the mom. It's LaToya's mom. Sorry. But he never let go of his grandmother's hand the entire time. So the nurse corroborated this. So now it's the nurse as well. So anyway, according to a police report, it was described that the boy glided backward on the floor, wall, and ceiling. So, now, like, even if before I thought, could they be kind of making this up? Mm-hmm. Could there be like some psychological issue in the family, and they're acting something out? But then, and by the way, if there's a possession issue, doesn't mean you can't have a psychological issue too.
Right.
And it would certainly,
and it doesn't mean that you can't also have poltergeist.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can't have, once the door is open a little bit, it doesn't mean that you can't have a lot of different things happening. It doesn't mean that you can't have phenomena. And listen, we know that the human body is capable of enormous feats of strength and unusual things. That being said, that's still really weird and that's still not normal. And I would still say that falls under the realm of paranormal.
Yeah.
I guess the question then becomes, what is the what is the origination of it? You know what I mean? And I would say, just to speak to this again, it being a nurse, all of these people have reputations that at no point are they like, boy, oh boy, do I want to go on record that I think that, a family that I'm treating or a family that I'm helping is having some kind of supernatural experience. I'm sure none of them wanted to do that.
And remember, it's not just one or two people. It's, a chief of police.
Right.
It's other cops, and they seem to be less likely to conclude that, I would think. It's the social worker. It's a nurse. It's the physician. So now it's a lot. And could all these people be colluding? Maybe. But anyway, so the Department of Child Services takes the 3 kids away from mom at this point because clearly something's not okay. Also, she had been keeping them out of school because they weren't able to go to school. So there's more here than we'll cover tonight.
And it maybe just from the perspective, maybe they were safer out of the house, and maybe it had nothing to do with her parenting, but the circumstances in the house just weren't safe for them.
Yeah. And just, to be fair, to be completely transparent, I'm reading news accounts. I did not read the 800 plus pages of actual documents, so there's probably more that I don't know than what I do. But anyway, April 20th, now it's 2012. A hospital chaplain contacted Reverend Michael, I'm going to say Maginot. I don't know if that's how you say his name, but I think so. The priest at the Catholic Church of St. Stephen Martyr Parish in Gary, Indiana. And the hospital chaplain asks Father Maginot to perform an exorcism specifically. That's a big deal, as we talked about in our last episode. If you didn't listen to the last one, you're going to hear a lot more about the specifics of exorcisms in our most recent other demon-themed episode. But so Father Maginot performs a total of 3 exorcisms, and he's convinced that the youngest boy, is possessed. But
so these are church-sanctioned actual exorcisms, as far as we know.
As far as I can tell.
Okay.
Yes. And he tells, Father Maginot tells LaToya she and her family need to leave the house because it is not safe for them there. So whatever he witnesses in the house, my hair's standing up, she temporarily moves the family in with relatives, or she temporarily moves in with relatives. I think that the kids were not back with her yet. And then at some point, LaToya gives Valerie Washington, the DCS caseworker, and the police permission to inspect her home.
Right.
And you know what? If you have a lot to hide, I'm going to just say I probably wouldn't invite the caseworker and the police into my home if I'm trying to make something up. But she invites them in. And according to police records, here's where, again, I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. One of the officers, all the officers experienced something weird that freaked them out or was unexplainable. One of them, their audio recorders malfunctioned, at least one. I don't know if that was more than one person. The power light was flashing to indicate the batteries were dying, despite the officer inserting fresh batteries earlier that day. And yes, I realize that that's an easier thing to explain away, although it is common when people go in and investigate the paranormal for that to happen, as you know, Kathy. Another officer.
But I wouldn't expect that with a demon, to be honest with you. I don't think, that just wouldn't be something that I would expect with a demon, but of course, it doesn't mean that the only thing that might be in the house is demonic.
Oh, yeah.
There might be other things there as well.
There might be quite a lot. Another officer said he recorded audio and played it back later, but he had, it was creepy, heard an unknown voice whisper, "Hey," according to the Lake County police records. And again, that's probably not the scariest thing people will hear tonight, but if it's your recording and it's a voice you don't recognize and no one else is speaking, that would be weird. There was a photo taken at the house that appeared to have a cloudy white image resembling a face in it. And another photo seemed to depict a female figure in green, I guess, like the face, I think, was green. And photos he snapped, this other officer, or the same officer snapped with his iPhone, seemed to have strange silhouettes in them. So that was freaking them out. And by the way, this is not a huge house. I mean, I think it would have been pretty easy for them to secure the house. It's a 1-story, small-ish house, and you can look that up online. There are plenty of photos. And then another officer said that when he got home, his garage door wouldn't work. I think either it wouldn't work or it was going up and down, but his driver's side seat in his personal car started moving back and forth on its own. And, again, this was enough to freak them out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the kids are evaluated again by 2 psychologists at least, Stacy Wright and Joel Schwartz. So they independently evaluate the kids, and they independently conclude that the youngest boy was induced into a delusional system by their mother, and that their daughter's religiosity might be what is leading her to say stuff about demons and being in trances and so forth. So there is no paranormal explanation on as far as they're concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I guess DCS, stipulates all these things that LaToya has to do, and that the family has to be able to, all these benchmarks they have to achieve for her to be reunited with her kids. And by late 2012, LaToya is in a new home and the kids are returned to her. And there's no sign of possession or other supernatural or demonic activity. And I think one of the things stipulated was that for the kids to be returned home, no one could be talking about demons and demonic activity. So then it makes you say, all right, well, the Courier-Journal newspaper said that, after the story breaks in the Indiana Star, there's so much media attention and people kind of stalking the family basically and everyone connected. And there's all this negative attention. So this is like kind of creating a different nightmare for the family.
So just real quick, why was the story told?
I'm not exactly sure. And that might be documented somewhere, but I mean,
because she's already out of the house. She's already, you know what I mean? And
she's been through a lot.
Right. So why,
I mean, is it possible that, people get wind of things and then somebody goes to investigate and then she complies and gives permission?
Yeah, entirely possible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is it, I'm speculating.
I don't know though that would lead you to give 800 pages of medical, you know what I mean? Like
I'll tell you what would. I'm just thinking if I were LaToya, I would want people to, if I believed it, I would want to be believed. She's been through so much, and she's been telling people, and some people are believing and a lot of people aren't, including people in authority. Maybe you would want the records released so that people would understand, like, yeah, I'm telling the truth. That would be my motivation.
Right. I mean, and for me, I would look and be like, I don't want my kids touched by this at all moving forward. So, and I'm not saying that this is right, but I also would be like, let's let sleeping dogs lie. You know what I mean? And that would, my instinct would be, let's just zip it up, I mean, I understand wanting to be believed. To me, I wouldn't. To me, if someone came to you and said, listen, I'm going to report this one way or the other, and I'm going to release your name, which I don't know that they could do. But I would be interested in knowing how they got the story, why they got the story. And, like for me, I would be interested in knowing the steps that it took for the story to get out.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is important. And I don't know that I came across that.
Right.
I'm sure she must have done interviews since then.
Since then, sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that would be worth checking out. I know that when she agreed to have the newspaper, the Indiana Star, publish the details, she said that the condition was that her children's names not be released.
Right.
Now, of course, people can find out who's who, but...
Right. Well, the reason why I bring that up is I mentioned the Enfield poltergeist earlier, and the Enfield poltergeist, for those who don't know, is one of the best documented and validated poltergeist cases I think that there are out there. In fact, one of the Conjuring movies is based on it, although there's a huge amount of poetic license taken in the film. But the way the story of the Enfield poltergeist got out was there was a police report made. It came across the desk of a local journalist, who then went to the woman, because they were living in public housing. And essentially he said, hey, listen, this is going to get out one way or the other. Why don't you let me tell your side of the story? And
Right.
that just blew her life up, because he didn't really do that. He kind of took it and ran with it. And it ended up really kind of causing an enormous amount of trouble for her family. And I was wondering if it was the same kind of situation.
It's such a good question.
Yeah.
As you know, so she moves, and then in I think early 2014 or very late 2013, 4 days after the Indiana Star breaks the news of this story, not only do all these other people kind of descend on the family, but Zach Bagans of the Travel Channel of Ghost Adventures, who's actually probably the most notable TV paranormal personality at this time, or one of them.
Well, certainly one of them.
One of them, definitely.
And very polarizing. Very polarizing. You're either team Zach or you're not.
And we'll get into that more in a second, because he buys the house sight unseen for $35,000. And then he sets out to make a documentary.
Right.
He filmed this documentary, Demon House, and then raised the house in 2016. Now, I have not watched the documentary. You may be able to weigh in a little bit on that. What I have read is that people either, speaking of polarizing, love the documentary and think it's legit, or think it's like, not legit, or overstated. He's saying it's like the film is cursed, that it took 3 years to produce this, that, there were all kinds of paranormal phenomena that took place during the filming. I actually really want to see it now. But yeah. So
yeah,
whatever his motivation was, what's assumed is that the house is so evil that he says, it's got to be demolished. Mm-hmm. Do you have thoughts on the documentary Demon House?
I don't have, I would preface this by saying, I'm not sure I would call it a documentary.
Okay, he does. That's why I call it.
Right. He does. Zach Bagans in the past has said, I don't go in to investigate to find out if, and I'm paraphrasing, to find out if a place is haunted. I go in and investigate haunted places. So He doesn't go in with kind of a skeptical bent, right? He goes in and he's like, he throws himself into these places where there's huge reputations for very dark hauntings, and there always manages to be a very dark haunting when he gets there.
Kathy?
Yeah. Are you okay? Are you okay?
Yeah. You're going to think this sounds totally nuts. I don't know if we should edit this out or not. I heard a woman's voice, not yours, like over here, kind of in the distance, but the houses are somewhat far apart here. Like,
yeah, no, and your house you have a large house.
It sounded like someone was like 10, 12 feet behind me.
And what, do you know what it said?
No, I could hear a woman say something, but I couldn't hear what it was.
I wonder if we picked it up.
Freaked me out. And
I wonder if we picked it up on audio.
And just so you know, like I've got all the doors closed.
Do you have that camera in the back that you turned around? Does that have audio as well?
It does. It does. So I'll check that later.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That was really weird. It's so funny. And I don't, you know what? I'm not like scared sitting here telling you this, but what I have noticed in the last few weeks, and I don't know if it's just because I'm doing, this is an aside, more psychic work. I'm doing more remote viewing because we have this ongoing project that people are doing as a group. And, I've just noticed like weirder things, like more telepathy and more,
right.
little shadows
Right.
in the periphery. And I don't think it's something that's evil. I mean,
Right.
I kept thinking maybe it's Loretta, like little something scooting, but that voice was that I don't know
Was a
who that
woman.
was. Yeah, and that was really weird. And I thought that has to be by you, but I felt like it was by me.
That's interesting because I mean, maybe we did pick it up though.
Yeah,
You know what I
it'll
mean?
be
Like we
interesting to
have
see.
recording equipment.
Yeah,
So
and
maybe
what's
we did.
interesting is if it's by you, mine won't pick it up because I might have headphones on.
Right. It definitely was. I didn't hear it. You know what I mean? I didn't
Okay.
hear it and you reacted to it. So it sounds
Maybe it's
to me
blue.
like, yeah. Blue is like, by the way, let me talk to you about demons.
I'm in here.
I would say, you know, getting to the
Yeah.
Zach Baggins thing, just to reset it.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I will tell you, I don't generally. I think Zach Baggins is a showman. I think that he leans very heavily into a non-skeptical investigation. I think his television show is very entertaining. And I think that there's a lot of people who investigate the way he investigates, which is kind of, I'm going to say, balls to the wall, get in there, holler at the ghosts, get them riled up, and just try to evoke some kind of evidence. That's not how I investigate, but a lot of people do investigate. In fact, I would say most people probably investigate that way. And I don't necessarily think that that's wrong. It's just not my style. That being said, him going into this, he bought this house sight unseen with the plan of essentially doing what he did with it. So there was nothing in the documentary that I felt, other than the interviews that he had with some of the people who were involved. I did find those compelling. There was nothing evidentiary in his investigation of the house that I felt was supportive of his or their claim. Okay. So he didn't, in other words, there's nothing goes caught on tape that I was like, whoa, that's it. That's a demon, or, oh, that's it. That's a vortex or a portal or whatever. That being said, I don't think a paranormal investigator going in one way or the other is going to prove or disprove, because generally speaking, when you're talking about possession and you're talking, it's usually the person and not the place, right? So if you remove the person from the place, you break that. You know, there might absolutely be energy in a place, and there might even be, you know, dark energy in a place or demonic energy in a place. But when you remove the catalyst that is the person, it's generally very, very weak. So, I wouldn't expect a paranormal investigator to go in and authenticate the experiences of a family that is no longer there. You know, so I'm not going to come down on either side of it, except to say that I thought it was entertaining. And the same way I thought the Conjuring film was very, very entertaining. In fact, I thought it was a phenomenal film. It was a great story. It was a great telling of a story. It was not an accurate telling of the experience of the Perron family, the Perron family. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a great movie, you know, or that it wasn't entertaining, and to some degree, maybe even educational.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'm going to say, I understand what you're saying. The only thing I'm going to say is, you know, I'm sure you have walked into places where there's just a weird feeling. It's not a feeling, and you're noticing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that is the place. And there could be an interaction with a person having been in the place.
I understand what you're saying. And I think that in most experiences, to me, it's not the place might harbor residual energy from the people and the events that happened in it, but I don't think the place originates phenomena, or it is not in and of itself the cause of the phenomena. And then again, that's only in my experience. There are other people who will have completely different experiences, and, you know, and might have far greater experience in situations. Most of the investigations that I've done, and I've done a lot of large scale locations, I've done a lot of lunatic asylums, hospitals, and things like that, where you definitely do feel residual energy. But when I've done smaller, more personal investigations, to me, it's invariably been the people rather than the place. But I am, there are people who I greatly respect who have had other experiences. I just personally haven't had that.
Yeah, I want to come back to that definitely, because I think we could have a much longer and more in-depth discussion about that. Because I'm even thinking, just as an aside, paranormal. If you're there, you are fine there, and I'm so glad you are. But you and other people have experienced phenomena that it could be residual, but it could be that there's some sentient being attached to some of the stuff in there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you know what I mean? And so I'm kind of thinking how does that gel with it not being the place?
Because it's the item.
Okay.
I mean, and again, you can have a building, I suppose.
That's like
I'm just saying, in my experience, it's almost in the experiences that I've had, it's never been that, which is not to say that it can't be. Okay. Right. But it's, one of the things I can think of is as an example of what you're saying versus what I'm saying is something like the Bell Witch, where there's a cave, and this cave has, it's the phenomena seems to originate from that particular cave, and whatever it is that is active there chooses that place as a domicile. So and that would be an example. That's me actually contradicting what I'm saying. It's okay. So I'm just saying, in my personal experience, I have not had that. Okay. That being said, I have absolutely been to places where I think there are spirits that are present there. But when you're talking about possession, or you're talking about oppression, or you're talking about attachments, generally speaking, it's the person and not the place. Okay. The activity goes with the person, or it's a combination of the two. And when that's broken, it's broken on both ends, or it's broken for both ends.
No, I mean and I think that's a really helpful set of distinctions. And again, we could talk about this for hours. What I wanted us to talk about in the last, minute or two that we have for this episode is, why did this, assuming this is real and demonic or not, but it sounds like more than just a normal haunting to me, even a bad haunting. Why did this happen to this woman and her family? Because I have some thoughts, but I don't know if you have thoughts.
Well, I will tell you that in the cases of in the Christian perception of demonic possession, and while I understand that this is a negative experience for these people, there is nothing was determined as to whether or not it was demonic. There was no information that was exchanged that would lead one to have evidence that what they were dealing with was a demon, right? But when you have a person who's very, very religious, apparently the daughter was very, very religious, and
that's what the psychologist said, that the religiosity.
I'm just gleaning that information.
Okay. Yeah.
Most of us interpret our experiences through our belief system, and so you have that. You don't if the family had been Buddhist, let's say Buddhists have exorcist rites, so they could have, they just don't believe it's demonic. They don't consider them demons. So why would it happen to a family like this? In the Christian belief, there has to be an invitation, right? So there has to be something consensual, and you read Malachi Martin's book where he talks about that, where there has to be the slightest, even just a hair's breadth of an experience where the invitation is sent, even in the biggest, most famous exorcism case in the world, which is the fictional case that Peter Blatty talks about in the film and the book, The Exorcist. The little girl invites this demon in by using a Ouija board and saying this is her friend, and yes, come play with me. So there has to be some kind of consensual, some kind of consensual, some kind of invitation to come in. As far as why they would why it would happen to this family, one of the things that I could think of is that there was something paranormal that was happening in the house that was then interpreted as negative, and the fear that was attached to the idea, that the only perception or the only way of interpreting paranormal phenomena was as negative, kind of amplified the negative aspect of it and led to it becoming a darker experience than maybe it originally was, and maybe it was interpretation. That is presuming two things: one, that something paranormal happened, and two, that the family believed that it was a demon. So, I think that there's probably lots of other explanations. That's the first one that popped into my mind. I'll tell you the thing that I'm uncomfortable with, as far as this being demonic, or being a genuine demonic, meaning a fallen angel, non-human entity kind of thing, is the fact that a 7-year-old child was exhibiting signs of possession like this. Because although in movies and films and things like that, you see a lot of children being presented as the people who are possessed, it's actually a rarity in real cases. And the reason is that 7 is about the age of kind of reason, right? The age of where a child can make determinations and conscious choices. So you don't really see that much in actual possession cases. You see it as they start to get to 12, 13, 14, and then older. You don't see a lot of 7-year-olds. And so that would be something that that's something that I found certainly uncomfortable, but also leads me to believe that there might have been other things going on in the house that the child was either replicating or became kind of infected with, versus an actual possession.
No, I definitely hear what you're saying. One thing I was thinking of, and this is maybe a less paranormal, well, it's not paranormal, because I was thinking like, okay, why this family? And I was thinking, in a way, maybe evil spirits or demons, if we're going to assume that there are such a thing. And I think we agree that there very well could be. Maybe they're like evil people and they prey on the vulnerable.
Oh, 100%. I think their financial situations, the likelihood of them being believed, I would even wager their position in society, be it their faith, their race, their socioeconomic, whether or not they're likely to be believed or not, whether, and honestly, women who are perceived as being hysterical, there's lots of things that I think that we find that people get targeted because of whether or not they will be helped, whether or not they'll be allowed to be helped. And, I absolutely believe that that's entirely possible. I think you make a good argument, just like people, it's like, I'm going to pick something that's going to be, I'm going to pick something. No one's going to believe you. And that's part of the excitement for the,
to go.
Absolutely.
Couldn't leave the home financially.
I don't have the financial means to leave the home.
What generates more fear and hopelessness?
Right.
Which something evil would probably find quite delicious.
And think about it. I'm going to create a situation where they take your kids.
And what is worse for a mother than to imagine that?
And the helplessness of it. The utter helplessness of it. So not only can you not protect your children from whatever it is that's scaring them within the home, and they see you are afraid as well, right? So they see that you're afraid as well. Not only can you not protect them on a day-to-day basis, but when you go to get help, the result is that they're taken from you. Right. So, I absolutely think that. And I do think that when you look at lots of possession cases and lots of let's not call them exorcisms. Let's talk about quickly about deliverance, where you have deliverance ministries, which are essentially like exorcism light, but which is only
Or
because we
somebody
overly
who's not the clergy could actually do a
well,
deliverance.
I mean, and there's lots of deliverance ministries. It is always the clergy, right? So it's always it's not usually a lay person, but in lots of different cultures and lots of other faiths, you don't require someone who is ordained by any kind of any incorporated religion. You really just require someone who's extremely pious. And in lay ministries and deliverance ministries, these things, like the laying on of hands and things like the anointing of with oil and things like that, which is very similar to what the clairvoyants suggested. You have lots of avenues for that. Whereas with the Catholic rite of exorcism, it's much, much more restrictive, but you do have other avenues for it. And it seems like she looked for those avenues, right? It seems like she went in the avenue. I would be interested to know whether or not, two things I would be interested to know. One is whether or not the Catholic, number one, the Catholic exorcism, whether or not it was an actual exorcism and not a kind of blessing, because there's several types of exorcism. There's also a church in the United States called the Old Catholic Church, which is not a Roman Catholic church, and they do often perform exorcisms. They are not sanctioned by the Catholic Church. They don't have the weight of the church behind them. And I'm not sure how much that matters, when it comes to exorcisms, but they are called the Old Catholic Church. They perform lots and lots of exorcisms. But if she just essentially went to whomever would help her, it sounds like she did. So I would be interested in knowing whether or not they were Catholic, and whether or not the church that actually sanctioned the exorcisms was also Catholic. And I'm not implying that one type of exorcism is more powerful or stronger, because in my research, it has less to do with the exorcist than it does with the faith and the belief in the exorcism itself, or the power behind the exorcism, which is generally a higher being or a supreme being.
Right.
But it does sound, no matter which way you cut it, it sounds like those kids had a terrifying experience. And whether it originated, whether it originated from a more pedestrian place, it seems to have rolled into something much larger.
Yeah.
So that's, why do we gravitate towards these stories? I think it goes back to what you said, is who do you call for help? Yeah. Like something's happening to you, and 99.9% of people are going to think you're full of it, right. And on top, not only do they not believe you, it's still happening. It's still happening. And so I think that we as a collective, we as a community, go to these stories kind of in a way for us to be like, it's not me. Like we can watch and we can experience those things, but also do it safely through the kind of lens of fiction, or the lens of a storyteller.
Like, at least it's not real,
Yeah. Woo. At least it's just a movie.
It's like,
but for them, it wasn't.
Discharging. Right.
Yeah.
So we're curious to know what you all think. If there's something also that you want to add to the information we shared, please do it in the comments. Kathy, any last words before?
No, I really am interested in knowing what our listeners and our viewers, what kind of experiences have you had related to this? This is not a case where we're talking about something that was simply paranormal. We're actually talking about a very specific type of paranormal experience that leans into kind of our belief in another world that is kind of organized and has a higher power. And it's not just about religion, but about this kind of hierarchy of spirit. I'd be really interested to know what you guys think. And also if you've had any experiences yourself.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Until next time, thank you for joining us. Until next time, stay curious.
And keep exploring.
This has been another episode of Curious Explorers with Kathy Kelly and Traci Stein. If you enjoy the episode, please do like, share, follow, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. Tell us what you'd like to hear more about. And of course, until next time, stay curious.